Well, Manso and Clay Ferraro, your latest Miami sports pod. And Clay, another uneven weekend in South Florida sports in the football world. The Miami Dolphins winning their third straight game, so that's the good news, though it was a little maybe closer than expected against a Bears team that showed a lot of life with Justin Fields. So we'll talk about the good and bad of the Dolphins. Really comes down to offense and defense. And, of course, the storyline on Saturday night, that's the Miami Hurricanes getting embarrassed against Florida State. Their rivals, a sold-out crowd at Hard Rock, and it really was ugly in a 45-3 loss. But let's start, Clay, with the Dolphins. Your main takeaway in a game in which Tua Tagovailoa once again threw for over 300 yards, didn't turn the ball over, threw for 3 touchdowns, yet they had to escape with a 35-32 win because Justin Fields really torched Miami's defense.
Do you want the good news or the bad news first?
I like the good news. The Dolphins are 6-3. Let's start with the good.
Tyreek Hill's the MVP of the league. And
not Tua, not Tua though.
No,
because I was actually, you and I don't usually go over the shows ahead of time. I think Tua is the MVP of the league. You think Tyreek Hill is?
I'm going Tyreek Hill because and it's never happened, by the way. So we're talking first half of the season MVP at this point. Wide receivers never won the MVP of the league. Well, I am blown away, and this goes back to training camp. Mm-hmm. You watched him in practice, you watched him in camp practices, and you're like, man, he's just different. What you're starting to see with him is he is quarterback neutral. It doesn't matter. As long as you protect the quarterback, it doesn't matter if it's Patrick Mahomes. And look, Tua Tagovailoa has been fantastic. But when you watch Tyreek play, if you try to play him man coverage, he's going to beat whoever's guarding him. If you try to play him zone coverage, he's going to find the soft spot in the zone. He's one of those rare.
And if you double him, Waddle's out there.
Yeah. And, you know, he reminds me a bit of LeBron in this sense that his physical ability is incredible, but it's his mental ability, his intelligence, his feel for the game that I think sets him apart from so many other players in the league. And look, I admired from afar what he did in Kansas City, but I think everybody felt on some level that having one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And look, Tua Tagovailoa may indeed have already put himself in that conversation. But I think the feeling was that, you're leaving Patrick Mahomes, who has this ridiculous arm and would just throw it. No, man, when you have somebody like Tyreek Hill, he finds a way to get open, and Tua has certainly been a huge part of that as well.
I'm just adding this in here because I want to see it written down. You're saying Tyreek Hill, hold on, MVP. That's what we're going with.
Yep.
You are saying Tyreek Hill is the MVP of the NFL. Let me tell you something. It's not as crazy as it sounds, right? Because when you put it in the perspective, when I say that because of the history of receivers, all the great receivers in the league, what Tyreek is doing is incredible. I mean, you look at through 9 games more than anybody's ever had. I mean, he's on pace for a 2,000-yard season. Clay, to your point, it's hard to defend him. I mean, I chimed in for a second where you were saying that and said, do you double him? But the problem is you got Jalen Waddle on the other side. I'm not even sure Tyreek's not even breaking double teams if you give him time anyway, so not that it matters that much. The fact that he's the most special player on the field, right? And yet he finds a way to not just make plays, Clay, but be wide open. And I hear a lot of fans, not really Dolphin fans, but I think NFL fans in general who still want to knock Tua somehow. And at this point, you've run out of knocks. I mean, what do you knock him on? But the one leftover knock is, well, of course he's going to, throw for 300 yards. He's got wide open receivers running around. But yeah, Tyreek Hill is wide open a lot. But you and I talked last week about the contested catches that he makes and the tough catches. But I think it just goes to show how difficult it is to slow him down. So you're saying Tyreek Hill potentially MVP. I'm saying right now Tua Tagovailoa to me is the MVP of the league because you're right. Tyreek is special. What Tyreek is doing is phenomenal. Having the weapon like Jalen Waddle is as well. But I look at Tua and I look at the numbers he's putting up, the efficiency, the accuracy, and it was on display again in Chicago. We're going to talk a little bit about the defense in a moment, about Justin Fields and, the impact he made. And Tua said after the game, he was so impressed with Fields. He was in awe of the 178 yards rushing. But what Mike McDaniel has done is put the full trust in Tua making it pay off by finding Hill and Waddle. And right now, Clay, I don't know. What did Tyreek say after the game to the national broadcast? He said he's the best quarterback in the NFL, most accurate passer in the league, right? Mm-hmm. I think he's right. I mean, Josh Allen struggled on Sunday, and look, there'll come a time where Tua will struggle this year. He's not going to throw for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns every game. But when he's out there, Clay, he's making plays that aren't supposed to be this easy. At one point in the game, he was 9 of 9. He hits guys in stride. The touchdown to Waddle was a perfect example. I mean, he threw that ball fully trusting Waddle would come get it. There were 3 or 4 defenders around. Waddle came up, made the play at the front of the end zone. Again, what Tua is doing can't be overstated. He has taken the step from, can he stay healthy? Can he be productive? Is he a game manager to he is a superstar and an elite player? Tyreek has a big reason to do with that. But right now, the Dolphins offense, Clay, it's weird. Every time they have the ball, I expect them to score. Every time it's third down, I don't think, oh gosh, it's third down, they're about to punt. I expect them to convert just about any third down. And that tells you, I think, a lot about the steps Tua has taken, the progression in his game.
Yeah, and here's the weird thing is, and I know what's coming because I said Tyreek Hill is so great, and Tua is such a polarizing player that that there's going to be the faction of Tua fans who decide to jump on and say, oh, well, you're just saying that you're saying that to diminish what Tua has done to this point. No, absolutely. Look at what Tua did early in that game, the throw to Jalen Watt and the throw to Trent Sherfield. I mean, what I am saying is, I think Tua has been great. I think it's difficult to give an MVP to a player that's missed a couple of games for, when you're talking about the first half of the season, okay? I mean, if we get at the end of the year and he's done this for every other game the rest of the way, then yeah, we can alter this conversation.
Well, how about the fact that when he finishes, they win? So isn't that part of the MVP conversation?
Yeah, sure. Perspective? But when I watch him, I think he's a really good quarterback. I think he's certainly put himself in the top 5, top 3 conversation. When I look at Tyreek Hill, I see a guy who is doing what nobody else is doing, and
that's fair.
May not be I have to go back to Randy Moss to remember seeing a player where, like, when I watch him, and it was the year when Randy Moss was with Tom Brady, the first year that he was there, when Brady would just chuck it up there and go get it. And heck, you go back to Randy Moss's rookie year, and when he had that connection with Randall Cunningham, like, he showed up to Minnesota, and all of a sudden, Randall Cunningham's career was revived. Like, that's the type of thing that I'm seeing with Tyreek Hill. And that does not mean that Tua Tagovailoa has not also put himself in the MVP conversation and may not also be top 2, top 3 quarterback in the NFL. When I watch Tyreek Hill, though, I see somebody different. I see somebody that
there's nobody like him. There is no one like him.
Unreal. And so look, we came into the season saying, number one, of course, you want to go and win the Super Bowl. Number 2, you got to spend this year finding out for sure if Tua Tagovailoa is your franchise quarterback. Guess what?
You got part of that.
Check.
You got part of that. Yeah. The Super Bowl thing, we still got weeks to figure out. The quarterback, I'll tell you another thing, Clay, and this is something that's hard to measure. It's not statistical. And I think you will agree with me, though, again, I haven't talked to you about this, but in particular, the last 2 or 3 weeks, or how about this? In particular, since he came back, that Pittsburgh game, right? When you look previously, Tua was still a little guarded, and he talked about it in training camp, being guarded. It's just his personality. Have you not noticed the last 2-3 weeks, let's say 3 weeks, right? Tua's having a lot of fun, not just on the field with the numbers he's putting up in his performances, but Tua's having fun around the media, which is, I know people may hear that and say, oh, who cares if he's nice to the media?
Yeah,
it's not about
that deep ball's gotten better, huh, guys? That deep ball's gotten better.
The joke he made this week, for those that missed it, joking around, he wasn't even asked. The question wasn't even about his deep ball. The question was, hey, Tua, what are some of the things you look that you're improving on that you like? And he said, hey, that deep ball, kind of a sarcasm, that deep ball's not bad, huh? Because he knows the narrative that's been out there about the deep ball, the personality, the joking, the conversation. Again, this isn't about Tua's always been good with the media. He's always been fair. He makes himself available. At times a little dull. It's his personality to be guarded. No one can criticize him for that because that's okay. You can be guarded and you can want to not say a lot. But I think part of the ability now and the way that he's been doing these things now and joking, like you just referenced, is that he's so confident in himself and has so much confidence from his teammates, has so much confidence from his coach, that nothing that we in the media can say to him, nothing that anyone can say on social media can sway him away from the fact that he knows he's got the full support of everybody in that organization. And it hasn't always been that way in his first few years in the NFL.
Yeah, and to that, you have to credit Mike McDaniel. And we keep coming back to this. And I want to give Mike McDaniel credit for one more thing, too. We said a couple of weeks ago, when they had the losing streak and things were kind of going sideways. And also they were making mistakes, a lot of mistakes. And it was one of those things where it's like, okay, we're going to find out right now what Mike McDaniel is all about as a head coach. Because if you are a head coach that is not prepared for the position of being a head coach, if you're the guy that you should just be an offensive coordinator,
yeah,
that's the time when things start to go sideways that you can't get it back. And this is not saying that we know definitively that Mike McDaniel is going to be a Super Bowl Hall of Fame caliber head coach. But what I know right now is that when he has faced adversity already in this first year as a head coach, he has responded and the team has responded in kind. And I don't think it's just as simple, Will, as, oh, Tua came back and everything got better. No, they were beating themselves in a couple of those games. There were the Minnesota game in particular, that was a winnable game. And by the way, Minnesota right now looks
7-1.
Pretty darn good.
They look like a pretty darn good team, yeah.
The Dolphins doubled their total yardage, doubled their first, but they just kept shooting themselves in the foot. And it takes a head coach to be able to go in there and bring a sense of accountability. And by the way, I actually asked McDaniel about that after the win the following week. 2 weeks later, it's all running together now. Because their penalty numbers went down. The Pittsburgh game, their penalty numbers went down significantly, and they didn't turn over the ball, if I remember correctly. And he immediately deferred any sort of credit. I said, what did you say to them? Like what? And he didn't want to talk. He wanted to talk about how they took ownership of it, that. And I'm sure to a certain extent that's right, but there are plenty of teams that the players would not take ownership of that, and that has to do with the head coach and instilling a culture.
I think he's getting there, and I think people forget that he is a first-time head coach. I think I've gotten a lot of people tell me like they don't like certain things about McDaniel. I will say this: look, his clock management at the end of halves has not been good. This is the second time that I remember that I didn't like the way they handled the final minute or so. In this case, it could have cost me. It cost him 3 points, not by McDaniel's decision-making, because the fact is Jason Sanders missed a kick that he normally makes right before the half in Chicago. By the way, that's a problem. Jason Sanders does not look like himself for us. No. That is a problem. No. I like the aggression. Part of it has to do because Sanders is struggling, that he continued to be aggressive on a big fourth down in the second half that they weren't able to convert. And by the way, it wasn't the play call. They covered Tyreek Hill well. Durham Smythe was right there wide open. Tua, it's so funny about Tua. We're now to the point where Tua is so good that we nitpick the one or two bad throws he makes a game. And he probably made two bad throws on Sunday. That's it. One of them was the fourth down where he threw it at his feet. That should have been an easy completion. Keep the drive alive, probably get points. But again, we're being really picky when a guy's throwing the ball 30 times and you're picking the one or two times that he didn't throw a perfect pass. But to McDaniel's point, though, those are little things that I think as a coach you have to learn. But to your point, Clay, as far as dealing with adversity, as far as being a motivator, as far as having guys behind them, it's clear this locker room believes in him. It's clear they trust him. And I think the most important relationship McDaniel has is his relationship with Tua, which Tua has never had in the NFL. And, this isn't about a Rip Brian Flores segment again, which has been going on for a couple of years now. But the reality is, for whatever reason, Brian Flores didn't believe in Tua, and there was that friction there that no longer exists. And I think McDaniel has this team playing great, but there are concerns. I just mentioned Jason Sanders. Clay, you and I talked about it last week, and it's funny, in reading the comments on YouTube, people are like, well, you guys, what about all the plays the Dolphins defense have made throughout the season? Yeah, you're right. The Dolphins defense at times has made plays, but those plays weren't evident on Sunday in Chicago. Unlike the Detroit game where the Dolphins defense, give them credit, rebound in the second half, pitched a shutout, there was every reason to believe they were going to blow that game on defense. And if it weren't for probably a missed PI call and then a drop pass by the Bears on a 4th and 10, we may be having a conversation where like the Dolphins offense is a well-oiled machine and the defense is a major concern. So I ask you, how concerned are you? Was that just a case of Justin Fields is unbelievable? He's a special talent who's really coming to his own? Or are we really concerned about this Dolphins defense?
Well, as always, there's a little bit of everything. I think we are really concerned about the Dolphins defense. And I think, your point about Brian Flores, I think they miss Brian Flores. I think they miss having that. And his fingerprints were in many ways on the roster defensively. And so I think a lot of the thing now, Josh Boyer obviously tried to continue doing a lot of what Brian Flores did. It's not working as well. And I also think a big part of that is the injuries in the secondary, but I don't know how much better that's going to get. So my concern level is high because I don't know that it's not like you're going to get this huge. Maybe Byron Jones comes back. I think we all.
Yeah, who knows what's going on there? He was supposed to be back week 1, and then it's just getting pushed forward.
So the attrition sets in with all the other injuries back there. It's hard, man. It's really hard, and so that's my concern level is the combination of Brian Flores is gone, and you've had this attrition back there, and you don't know who's going to be coming back or when. And meanwhile, it just keeps getting worse. Now,
is it schemer players? Is it schemer players?
I mean, it's both. And again, that's not a cop-out answer, Will.
It's a cop-out.
I can look at both things. I can say Brian Flores is gone, and they don't have the players that they had. And so it's impossible for me.
When bad tackling, though, you got bad tackling. You got guys out of position. You got guys not setting the edge. I think that leans more toward coaching than it does toward talent. The secondary injuries. Look, injuries are part of football. They're dealing with injuries in the secondary. That's not a cop out or an excuse.
No, and yet I think the thing, and again, without the benefit of like being in the meeting rooms of it's our job to sit out here and like say what we're seeing. But I also think we have to like acknowledge there's a lot of stuff that we don't know. What we don't know is whose responsibility is it on every play to set the edge? Are some of these players trying to make up for mistakes that other players are making because they're inexperienced
which is again coaching, not taking care of what your job is. You can't start covering for others because then you're not doing your job well.
Sure. But again, I think it's it's everything. Now, to your point,
I think they have talent though. I think especially getting Bradley Chubb, I think there's talent there for this to be a solid defense, not an embarrassingly bad defense.
No, and look, Chubb played well. I was impressed by what I saw. It wasn't perfect, and I think there's still the acclimation period. But when you're talking about playing high-level football, the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And you know that offenses are going to exploit what they see as a weakness. So concern level is high, but it's not to the point where like, oh my goodness, they're not going to make the playoffs because the defense is bad. That guy was amazing. And
impressed, Clay.
I love watching it when players, they show up in the league and you can see growth. And what he's doing right there is so great. And here's the other thing, Will. The Dolphins have played 3 quarterbacks this year that to some degree can beat you badly with their legs and their arms. And so you had Josh Allen, who is the bigger guy, still fast, but like he's gonna run you over. You had Lamar Jackson, who is a Ferrari, and then you had Justin Fields, who's like somewhere in between there. I think it's really hard when you have somebody who can do both, and I think it's extremely tough.
He can do both, and he's still so young.
And Will, I felt watching that game, there were a couple of times where I think the Dolphins defensive players underestimated either his speed, his strength, or both. And look, that happens. And Mike McDaniel said it. Every once in a while, you're going to run into a player like that. And maybe the next time, if they play Chicago again in 3-4 years or the Super Bowl, whatever, they'll have a better idea for how to contain him. I just thought there were a few plays on Sunday that were just Justin Fields making plays. And I wasn't overly worried about the Dolphins, like taking bad angles or whatever, because sometimes got a player like that, they're going to outrun your angle.
There has been enough good in the Dolphins defense at times this season that I think that there's potential for them to be okay. But there's also been enough bad in this defense that it worries me as it moves forward. Look, the next 2, including Cleveland next week, they've got a couple games they should win, in between. The bye week is mixed in there as well. And then the schedule gets really tough. And you would hope that 3-week period of 2 winnable games, the bye week, gets Bradley Chubb comfortable in the system. And as you referenced, I mean, he looked like Bradley Chubb to me today, like a couple of times maybe over pursued, but you saw him get in the backfield. You saw him be a guy who could really wreak havoc. I mean, he clearly is a special player that they gave up assets for and signed to a big deal for a reason. I think potentially getting Byron Jones back, who we referenced earlier, I don't know what the update on his is because I don't think the Dolphins really know what the update. Every week they hope he's going to be able to practice, and every week Mike McDaniel sits up there on Monday and says he's not practicing. And this has been going on again. This isn't new. This has been going on since week 1. Remember, we were all at training camp entering week 1 thinking, okay, is he going to be okay? And then they put him on the pup, right before. Okay, he's out 4 weeks. And okay, 4 weeks going to pass. Just overcome that early part of the tough schedule. He'll be back. And here we are, 9 weeks into the season, and he's not back. So if you could get him back, I think that'll help this conversation a lot. And I haven't heard anything to think that he won't be back this year. But again, there's been no clarity as to when yet. Every week we wait. So the bottom line is this: the Dolphins are 6-3. They've won 3 in a row. And we say it every week. We nitpick at these little things as they continue to win. And the one constant is that when Tua Tagovailoa is out there and finishes a game and you keep him upright, and Clay, you said it forever, as long as he's healthy, that's all that matters. His health is the only concern. They're going to win games. They should win next week. They should be in great position in this playoff race down the stretch with tough games. So we obviously will continue to discuss that. Not in great position, though, and not in a good situation right now. The Miami Hurricanes. I mean, I don't think anybody thought they were going to win on Saturday. I don't think the most optimistic Canes fan thought they were going to win. This team has not shown any signs of real life, and the injury to Tyler Van Dyke, not knowing what you were getting. But Clay, they get destroyed by 42 points. Mario Cristobal, there is no hot seat for Mario Cristobal, so let's not even start that silliness of his, was he the right guy, anything like that. This is just about the now. Mario Cristobal has not done a good job in the now. Now, you and I both know that the now was not why Mario Cristobal was hired. He was hired for the future, for his recruiting, what he could build, sustaining a winner. But at the same time, it's disappointing. This team is so bad and they got embarrassed at home. I don't think there's any excuse. I think there's enough talent for this team to be better. And I can't give Mario a pass just because it's a new year. And, he's got to work his system with players he didn't know. This team should not be as bad as they've been, and certainly not as bad as 45-3 in prime time to your rival.
So the one thing Mario talked about so much was this culture and, how hard the guys worked in the offseason in building this culture. And then, why is it whenever they fall behind by 2 touchdowns, it just looks like they don't think they have a chance to come back and win? And
I'll tell you why in a second. I want you to finish it up, but I think I have the answer to that.
No, give me the answer to that, because I'm curious.
I think the answer is this. I think half that team has quit on him. I really do. I think that Mario has come in, and this isn't to clear blame of Mario, because as a coach, you're supposed to get the most of the players you have. I think Mario's come in with his culture, and he's tried to establish whatever it is that he wants to do. And he's talked about how he worked at FIU and helping turn a program into a team that went to 2 bowls. He's talked about it at Oregon, and look, he left a great situation over there. They're winning with a new coach and playing well with Mario's players. He talks about that culture, but part of that culture, I think, eliminates half your roster. And I think there are kids on that team that are saying to themselves, I'm not part of the present or the future. Look, Jalen Knighton's a perfect example. I mean, Jalen Knighton, you saw he barely was on the field. He had one big long run, but he had fumbling issues. I'm not sure if he's buying into Mario's culture. All the things. Thad Franklin's another guy. Don Chaney's been out. But you look at the receivers, the guys going in and out. I think there are a lot of players that just know they're not part of the future, and they're already thinking of the portal. And in Mario's case, he's trying to get the guys that he thinks might be part of something along with his recruits. And when you have it all, you have a team that's like a half a team. You have a team that a coach can't figure out how to use the players he has because he's trying to force his system and culture on the players that maybe don't want part of it. You got the guys that aren't part of it who are thinking, I'm out of here anyways. What do I care? And what you're getting is a horrendous product on the field. So who's to blame? Everybody. It starts with the coach. Mario's job is to get the most out of those guys. I don't care what the excuses are if they're not going to be there. As a coach, you have to get these guys to play to a level and believe in themselves. And that's not happening because you can't tell me that they are that much worse than Middle Tennessee. You can't tell me they're that much worse than Duke. As good as I think Florida State is becoming under Mike Norvell, you can't tell me that they're that bad compared to FSU. They're a team that part of it is quit. They're a team that's part of it. Mario doesn't know exactly what to do with the guys he has. Josh Gaddis, who we can talk about in a moment, is not done well with, he's trying to force this offense and the players that I think have no clue how to be part of it. And I'm not even sure if this offense is really what you want in college football now. There's a lot happening, a lot of blame, but it starts at the top of Mario. This team looks like a team that is quitting. I mean, it just does.
Okay, so you explained all that better than I could. So let's set that to the side because I want to get back to the assistant coach conversation here. We'll talk about Gaddis in a moment. Because look, he's the one who's been criticized the most. The one thing that I've gotten from a few people about Kevin Steele is are they doing things that are maybe too complicated for college football? And there was one play on Saturday night where how do you end up with a defensive tackle guarding a running back late in the set? late in the second quarter, and you basically give them field position because it feels like you're trying to outthink the opponent, and you end up outsmarting yourself. And so, Will, what I think this team needs, and it may be on both, and this is throughout college football. College football, you got to get the players, and you got to get them to execute. You don't need to outthink anybody. You need to out-talent, and you need to out-execute. Yes. And what it feels to me is I think you have two coordinators who, to this point, don't seem to be doing what needs to be done in college football, where with Kevin Steele, it seems like sometimes they're doing stuff that's too complex. Whereas with Josh Gaddis, my question is, why did all this stuff come out after he came to Miami, where like all of a sudden people are saying, oh, well, Michigan wasn't sad to see him go. And then now you see this offense where I don't know if it's that he's a poor play caller, or is it, to your point, that that's not how you want to run an offense in college football unless you have Alabama-type athletes?
Well, but by the way, how about if you have an offensive line, which he had at Michigan? You had the offensive line he had at Michigan. Of course you can run power football. Of course you can be a little bit more conservative at times. Of course it's not all about the spread. But guess what? Miami doesn't have that. And I don't know if Mario's plan, given that Gaddis is his hand-picked offensive coordinator, is to get as much offensive line talent. Every coach wants to recruit offensive line talent. But it's not a scheme thing. It's a size thing. You need the big guys up front, and the Canes don't have that. So are you saying then, I don't mean you, I mean, are we saying in general that Gaddis, you can't judge him until he has those horses? Because I'll tell you what, I mean, expecting a coach's system to work only when you have a great offensive line, to me, sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, you can say that about any offensive coordinator throughout all of college football.
Yeah. That's like saying Mike McDaniel. Okay, yeah, if he didn't have Tyreek Hill, his system wouldn't work as well. Well, duh, yeah. I mean, Mike McDaniel's a brilliant offensive mind who clearly has a great plan, but obviously having Tyreek Hill helps. So you can't tell me that Josh Gaddis then is going to be like, well, I got to wait to get my offensive line. When's that going to happen? I haven't seen anything. And by the way, you and I have had this discussion because we always go by the teams you follow, right? Like I look at the Giants and go back to the NFL, and Brian Daboll comes in, and I could guarantee you that half that roster, first of all, they eliminated half the roster, it seems like, right? Mm-hmm. Then they come in and they have guys under contract they couldn't eliminate, including their quarterback and Daniel Jones. And what has he done? He's gone and he said, okay, I'm going to play to these guys' strengths. The offense the Giants are running, the plan the Giants are running is not what Brian Daboll wants to do long-term, but it's what he has to do short-term to have success because he has to match the personnel, right? The Canes have come in and they had a potential top 10 pick in Tyler Van Dyke. And I'm not going to say they've ruined them because I think Tyler can still go on to have a good NFL career, but my goodness, he doesn't look anything like the player he was last year. Part of it, obviously getting injured the last few weeks hasn't helped, but you come in and you try to fit that system instead of saying, okay, what does Tyler do well? Let's incorporate our system a bit, but let's allow Tyler to keep, flourishing with a little bit more up-tempo, quicker decisions, get the ball out of his hands. You try to put him under center and a handoff or a shotgun, a handoff, and run this slow offense where it seems like every play is down to one when you're snapping the ball. That's not what made Tyler Van Dyke good last year, one of the best in the country. And by the way, that's on coaching because you have to watch that film and say, what made that player great? And if he's my starting quarterback, why would you go in another direction of not trying to bring out his strengths? Again, that falls on coaching. That's not a good thing in year one for Mario Cristobal. Go back to my original point, Clay. Doesn't mean he's not the right guy for the job, but you got to point the finger at him, Gaddis, and the staff for putting Miami in the position they're in right now.
Well, and he's going to have some tough decisions to make, and it may be with both of those coordinators. And one more thing about Gaddis and running that sort of an offense. The problem in college football now is any offensive lineman who is physically ready to do that is going to Alabama. They're going to Georgia
or Michigan.
Yeah, or Michigan. Because there's the history there. So that means that you have to rely on going and getting players and then getting them in your strength and conditioning program and hoping that in 2 years they're able to do that. But then what happens? When they start to show that, they're either in the NFL or they're transferring to Alabama or Georgia or Michigan. So to me, Will, it's like you can get I'm standing by this. Mario Cristobal can build a team that can win a national championship here. I am still sure of that because
I agree with you, by the way. I agree with you. I haven't lost all hope. I don't think Mario's the bad hire or anything like that. I don't want anybody to think that is what I'm trying to say.
But you have to do it at least initially a little bit differently than Alabama and Georgia. And I don't even know if Clemson is a good example there, because they started off doing things. It's a great example because you go back and look at Chad Morris. When Clemson initially had its success, they had Chad Morris, who was running a college-style offense as their offensive coordinator under Dabo. And then he moves on, and then Tony Elliott takes over. And so there's this natural thing where you're not running the pro-style, quote-unquote, offense, because you know that at least initially it's really difficult to get the five-star lineman who could go directly from high school to his rookie in the NFL if they wanted to, because those guys are – so you have to do things a little differently. You have to run a spread, or you have to do something where what Miami can do, Will, is they can go out – and this is a different subject, but it's something we were just having a great conversation about. You have to go around South Florida. You have to find the skill position players who aren't just five-star players. You want to get those guys, but I want to get the four-star players that when you talk to the coaches in this area, they had been playing football like adults since they were in Pee-wee ball. Like, they just have this extra sense for playing the game, and they love football. And they're going to go out there as freshmen, and they're going to live at Green Tree. So to me, Will, you have to do two things. You have to decide, do you really want to run the type of offense that is going to take potentially years to build the offensive line to run? And by the time you do, they're going to be looking elsewhere. And then also, you have to find out who are the recruits, especially in South Florida, who you can get, and they will show up to UM. They will love football. They will be four-star athletes, high three-star, but
and Mario knows that.
They will change the culture because they will live out there at Green Tree, and they will do exactly what
Mario was one of those. Mario was one of those guys, and that's where you can go. That's where you can go back past. And Mario said last week, I don't want to live in the theater of nostalgia, and he didn't want to make too much of. And I get why he said that, because you don't want to live in the '80s. But I think you can take lessons of the past, of that. It doesn't always have to be the five-star guy. Now, I will say one thing, as we finish off our thought on the Canes. Mario knows the recruiting is what's going to change his program, and he hasn't gotten a full cycle yet. I mean, he doesn't have his guys in yet. I mean, so to people that are yelling and saying Mario needs to go, he was the wrong hire, this isn't going to work out, in 3 years he's going to be out of a job. I will say this: could there be changes to the staff at the end of the year? Maybe a positional coach. I could see a position coach going. I'm not sure if Mario's going to be ready to move on from Gaddis or Kevin Steele. I think Coach Steele comes with a lot of success in his resume and his respect level. I think they are going to give those guys a fair shot with players that Mario brings in, because that is his strength. His strength is recruiting. Mario's a closer. And look, you and I don't follow recruiting closely as far as like this time of the year, following every little 5-star, 4-star that signs, agrees to come. But Miami's doing well. Miami's getting guys. I mean, they got their QB potential of the future. They got one of the top recruits recently, a cornerback that they locked down. The recruiting part of it seems to be there, but fans right now don't care about that. They want the product on the field, and I understand. Mario was asking for those rock bottom. Clay, I'll close on that. He says he doesn't think of those terms. That's a media term, right? Well, as I was watching the game Saturday, I tweeted it out. This is rock bottom, and I sure as heck hope it is rock bottom. And people may say, well, what about Middle Tennessee? Wasn't that rock bottom? It wasn't Duke rock bottom. But when I look at losing to your rivals at home, sold out crowd, national TV, and you get embarrassed, that is rock bottom. And you know what? It happened to Mike Norvell. It happened to him his first year, 52-10. And you know what's happened since then? They got a little better second year. They showed some signs. They beat Miami in that wild, the 4th of 14, and they're now in the top 25 in year 3. So if you're looking at, I know Kate says I want to say look at FSU as an example, but if you are looking for reasons to think that this could turn around and you're not going to be on this is terrible, he was the wrong hire, you've got to let him get his players. You got to let him coach those players. And yeah, in a year or two, if this isn't working, and if Josh Gaddis' offense is a mess and defense isn't good, and this team doesn't look like it's disciplined, because discipline has certainly been an issue, then yeah, I'll give you that pass. But right now, Clay, I really hope this is rock bottom because it didn't. I can't think of a time where it felt much worse than it did Saturday night at Hard Rock.
Yeah, that's rock bottom, period. Because it doesn't get worse than being embarrassed by your rival. It doesn't get worse than being on the field against your rival and knowing that it's JV versus varsity. And that's what it looked like.
That's what it felt like.
So, no, it can only go up from here because look, what else is going to happen? Are you going to go and play Florida State next year and get beaten that badly? I mean, it doesn't get worse than that. So you gotta hit bottom sometimes before you can bounce up. So it's not really. Again, we're having discussions about the now, and right now it feels like rock bottom, and I think it is. But Mario, as the head coach, as the CEO of this program, the important thing is how does he figure out how to bounce back? And I think you and I both agree that he's the right guy to get this.
I think if there's anything we could end it on is that. For all that I said that I'm disappointed, I am. For all that I said that fans should be angry, disappointed, you should be. For anyone who thinks that this is an indictment of Mario Cristobal as being the right hire, I think you're 100% wrong. I couldn't disagree with you any more than I do. I think Mario Cristobal is the right hire, and I think he needs a fair chance to get his guys in. If you don't agree with me, then well, what can I do? Can't do anything. All we can do is be back next week, Clay, where the Dolphins will be 7-3 and the Canes will lose another game that has everybody screaming.
And you'll disagree with us then, too.
And I'll disagree with you then. All right, thanks for listening. Subscribing to Miami Sports Pod.